Well, welcome to Metro. My name is Seth Conerly, one of the pastors on staff here, and it's great to have you with us, whether you're in the room, online, at Vandalia, whatever it looks like. I hope you're having a good one and enjoying this really great weather we have. Good gracious. It's been really nice. And we are in the midst of this series called Rinse and Repeat, and I've got to warn you in advance. I'm coming at you today. I just want you to know that in advance, all right? Like, you need to gear up and be ready, because some of you are not ready. Because whenever I started studying through the passages that we're going to be looking at both this week and next week, I was like, whew, okay, Lord, that's what you want us to go through? And he was like, yeah, you need to do that. I was like, I would probably prefer something a little bit lighter. He was like, well, I didn't tell you to do that. And I was like, well, fine. So we're going. And so we're going to be in the Old Testament for 2 weeks, and we're talking about 4 generations of people who couldn't figure this mess out when it comes to the same nonsense over and over and over again. And no, I'm not talking about your family. I'm talking about something going on in Scripture, although you're probably going to get triggered pretty hard towards your own family context, maybe, depending on where you find yourself. And we've been talking about these things of repetition and problems that we have in our lives that we can't seem to get out from underneath. We joked last week about the idea that, man, you'd think we'd get creative with the way we hurt people and the way we sin and do new, innovative ways of doing that. But no, for most of us, we just do the same old nonsense over and over again we've been doing for years. And we talked about all kinds of ways that can manifest in our lives as we cycle through self-detrimental, self-destructive behavior that can be both small in its scope or very large and detrimental in its relational fallout. And we're going to look at more of those as we continue both today and next week. Beyond that, we'll even be looking at generational sin, which is a pretty heavy one, and is where it's going to be coming for you today and next week, meaning that, hey, guess what? You can see that transfer across generations, whether that be organizationally, in an organization you're part of, or more intimately in your family setting. Now, I'll tell you, as I have been processing this, one thing I mentioned last week, but I did not get to, that I wanted to make sure I did as we get in this headspace, I joked about the fact that you have some messed up cycles and things you do in your life. Now, we all do. Now, some of those, yes, severe, and those are the ones we want to see ourselves break out of. Other ones are minor, and whoever you live with wants to see you break out of those, okay? Those are the ones that they know. Like, if you'll ask them, they know. And you want to know why I know that? Because I thought it'd be a fun exercise to ask my wife that question in preparation for this week, and I found out stuff about myself I didn't even realize that I was working with. She was like, yeah, we'll get to those one day. These are the ones we need to work on. I'm okay with that one. We'll get to it eventually. Right? And we all have those. And I had quite a list. I'll give you just one of mine. And then I asked her about hers so that I ultimately knew I had permission to say them, so that we're balanced, okay? And so I found out one that I didn't know I was as bad at as I am. But I realized in assessing it that not only am I bad at it, but there's probably 50% of every household somebody's doing this, all right? Whether it's your roommate, whether it's your spouse, your kids, whatever, I'm betting that one of you are like this. And what I do very just habitually is I create a water bottle jungle in my house. Does anybody know what I mean by that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I drink a water bottle down to about 20% left, and I just leave it for the water bottle fairy to pick up, okay? That water bottle fairy's name's Taylor. And so and by that, I should joke and say it's not, because she just lets it accumulate. She just lets a forest develop of what is these water bottles. I also am terrible about it with coffee mugs and tea. So I'll go down into my basement. Morning time is coffee. 2:30 in the afternoon when you need a pick-me-up is black Earl Grey tea. That's what you need, okay? And so I've got those in my basement. And water's fine if you let it sit. If you let coffee and tea sit, organisms develop on top of that, and that's a problem. And so I've seen that happen throughout my basement, and it's not great. And when I realize what's going on, she's tried to do the typical thing where you can kind of see maybe he'll get it. And she'll barricade my entire coffee station and water bottles, and it's pretty easy. I just part that Red Sea and move those bad boys over, and I'm good to go. I don't understand what the problem is. It's not great. So I am needing to work on that. And I'll tell you one that she has, that she does all the time, that drives me crazy, is that I am a competent driver, okay? You already know where I'm going with this one, all right? I'm a competent driver, no wrecks, nothing on my record. I took the classes so it didn't show up. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, some of you know. You've been there, all right? It's not on your record, so it never happened. Yeah, and so I'm good, okay? Clean slate. But for some reason, now she doesn't backseat drive, she doesn't side seat drive, whatever that would be in the passenger seat. She just makes noises. Anybody know what I'm talking about with that? Like there's just audible responses and noises to whatever I'm doing. Like we'll be sitting there, she's like, Seth. I'm like, what are you doing right now? What is that? Are you okay? Do we need to go to a hospital? What's happening with you? I'm fine. It's fine. It's that the whole time. Invisible handles she's grabbing, stuff like that. At any given moment, I'm a good driver. I don't understand what's going on. I am the more calm and like within the parameters of what the law says driver in our household. But for some reason, you'd think I'm Evel Knievel going around on this road, okay? So she does it all the time, and it never changes, and I do the bottle thing all the time, and it never changes. Yesterday, though, when I was preparing for my message, I brought my teacup upstairs, and I put it in the sink. I was a good boy. Yeah, it's all these goofy things that we can struggle with. But I can tell you right now, some of you, that might be your only takeaway from all of these messages we're doing for 3 weeks. You might walk away and fix a tiny little habit and just heal your marriage. I don't know. That might be you. And it's just been driving your spouse crazy for years. It's been driving your roommate crazy for however long y'all, but whatever. But I am wanting us to really focus in and really go into a deep personal dive within ourselves to assess the more wide-sweeping, more damaging, more problematic behaviors that we tend to repeat over and over again in our lives. The things that we try to justify and say are okay. This can be everything from a struggle with an addiction all the way to just behavioral and emotional responses that are incredibly damaging. I mean, you might go, man, I've got a struggle with anger, Seth, and you know, this is kind of where I'm coming at with this, and I just stuff until I explode. Or maybe it's just the way that you perceive the world and project that to those around you with just spewed negativity, that you're the type of person that no matter what you come to, no matter how positive or how good, you can find the cracks in it. You can point it out, and you're very willing to do so, and you don't even realize the damage you're doing to the people around you. I could go on and give you example after example, but the reality is that all of us are guilty to some degree or another of any number of things that we can't seem to get out from underneath. And last week we looked at that and the idea as Paul the apostle saying, look, I struggle to do that which I don't want to do, because as a follower of Christ, I desire to glorify God, but yet I still struggle, and it drives me crazy. And so we're going to look at the Old Testament at 4 generations. We're looking at 2 this week and 2 more next week. I'm pretty much going to give you like Old Testament review of the entirety of the book of Genesis of these generations. We're not going to read the whole thing. Calm down. But we're going to go through it and see these different generations on full display. So we're looking at 4 realities of destructive cycles. And we're going to be in Genesis 12, starting in verse 10. You can go ahead and turn there in your Bible, go to the Bible app, Metro app. We've got them all right there for you if you want to dive in there. It's even got autofill in the blanks, so you don't even have to wait for me to get to it. Genesis 12:10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. So just so you know, in the context of what's happening in history at the time, Egypt is one of the only places in that region that has a sustainable water source that when famine hit tends to not go away. And so all the surrounding regions, typically if a massive famine where there's just no water, no rain, no whatever, and everything's drying up, people just congregate to Egypt. And that's what's happening here with Abram. And Abram, just so you know, he's Abram right now. And if you're already like, that doesn't sound right, Seth, I thought his name was different. You're right, it becomes Abraham later, as we will see. But Abram is really kind of the beginning, the tip of the spear for what becomes the entire meta-narrative of Scripture. He's the first person that God really steps into in this very tangible covenant that leads to the birth of the nation of Israel, or the Jews, and ultimately the lineage of Jesus himself and our very salvation. And so it's very significant as we look through this lineage, and Abram in particular. So he's in Egypt because he's trying to take care of his family and everything in the midst of this famine. 11, as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are, okay? I know what a beautiful woman you are. And can I tell you this right now? Ladies, if your husband starts a conversation with, baby, you are so beautiful, I just want you to know it's about to go bad after that statement, okay? You know it. If he looks at, baby, you just look beautiful today. Can I talk to you about something? Like, that's what's going to happen next. It's always he's screwed up and done something dumb for the 1,000th time. He's got a real bad idea that he thinks y'all as a household should really jump in on. Just all kinds of something's coming when he's got to butter you up on the front end. And that's literally what's happening right here. So just know we've been doing it for thousands of years. It's not something we just figured out, okay? So Abram right here goes, looks at, I know what a beautiful woman you are. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. So it was like old school social media. They went over there and really were like, hey, you need to check her out. She's pretty great. You should go marry her. And she was taken into his palace, literally to become one of his wives. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. This is a very weird, specific instance of stepping outside of God's ideal, meaning that he should have had greater faith in who God was, that he could protect him. He shouldn't have been lying in the first place or telling half-truths, as we're going to see in a bit. But for some reason, Abram out the gates, and we're going to see later when he self-justifies and tells us why he did this. But what you're going to see is some pretty crazy, if you've never studied this narrative and these parallels, it's going to really throw you off, of just repetition of sin in an individual's life. And in Abram's, it's in this very specific and strange manifestation. And so the first thing we need to know about these destructive cycles and whatnot is this. One is destructive cycles start with flawed reasoning. Out the gates, that's where Abram's at. He's looking at his wife. He goes, man, you're beautiful. I think that the best way for us to kind of get past this situation is to, lie to these people. Part of the reason that that's problematic, and part of the reason that Abram was in this mindset, is he was falling prey to something that many, if not most of us, if not all of us, have fallen prey to at some point in time or another. And that's, we struggle to thrive when all we are thinking about is how to survive. When you're in a survival mentality and you're not thinking about thriving, you're just thinking about getting through the next day, making things, like you're just, Seth, I just got to make it, buddy, all right? All this like focusing on thriving and Lord and everything, that's all cute and dandy and fine. But like I'm telling you right now, I'm just trying to make it. And that's very much where Abram's at. Literally, his whole existence is surviving right now. He's been living with famine. He's got to go to this place. It's literally about survival. He's not thinking about thriving. And even in the way he's entering the land, he's going, hey, if you could lie to these people, that would be great so that ultimately I don't die. I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. And let's lie about this and make it work so I don't do that. So we got to be careful to not be in a survival mentality. We got to be focused on thriving if we ever want to actually do just that. One thing I want to point out to you in each of these, and I'll get to it in a minute, is but at each of these points, I'm going to structure it a little bit different this week. I'm going to give you kind of a premise as to what destructive cycles can be like, and then I'm going to give you some action steps. So it's just each point will have an action step. But before we get there, I want to kind of drive this point home for you and give an example of how this kind of manifests in our lives is we had flawed reasoning. So sometimes what will happen in life is that we'll walk into a situation and we'll have done something a certain way for so long, and we think that that way we've done it will translate into every setting we go into. A number of months ago, my wife and I were on what was going to be our first time in an airplane with our two little girls. And we had to figure out what that was like and figure out what to do. And it's a journey. It's a different feel. And with that, we got all our stuff together, all things. And one thing that we have that we use for the girls that is kind of their version of a sippy cup are these steel kind of tube tumblers. And they've got this screw on top. And they've got this like rubber straw, and then they've got this cap that latches on top with this like release button, okay? And both of them have one, and we have them with water, and we bring them onto the plane, and we're sitting there. Well, what we normally do in our everyday lives is pretty simple. We fill the thing up with water, we press the release button, and we hand it to our child, and the child drinks the water. What we did not anticipate is that the setting you are in matters when you open that water bottle. Because some of you are already ahead of me, and some of you are already with where I was at, and you're like, what is wrong with this scenario, Seth? What happens is a pressurized container, when brought up to 30,000 feet, changes. It changes fundamentally. And I know y'all think I make this nonsense up, but I am telling you the truth, and I was the one who did this time. It was Taylor, and it was fantastic. We are sitting in this plane at 30,000 feet. Everybody is finally settled in. We're at a 6 people wide deal with a lane in the middle, okay, like a walking up and down aisle. And she's sitting like right near the window. I'm in the center aisle seat, and there's 3 other people over here, okay? And she pops that button on that thing, and a 12-foot stream of water launches across the entire cabin. And I know you think I'm exaggerating, but I'm telling you, it hit the other window on the other wall and doused the whole aisle, okay? And I was so happy. It was amazing. Like, how do you play that off? You're at 30,000 feet and you just super soaking a whole row of people. It was awesome. Like they were like, "Are we going down? Was that coolant? What just hit us?" And then Taylor just kind of was in shock and awe and just trying to melt into her seat. And I was just like, it's fine, we're great. We'll laugh about it. Not now, we're not gonna laugh about it now? Okay, later, we'll laugh about it later. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. But in our lives, what we'll do is that we will have flawed reasoning on something, thinking, man, this makes sense in my mind. But in application, it doesn't work. Here's one for you as well. The setting matters too, because you might have been doing something for a long time. And because it was just you didn't realize that maybe it wasn't that productive, or certainly not that detrimental to those around you, because you just rolling on your own. But you change the setting, and that changes, right? You lived alone for a long time, and now you got a roommate, and you realize that, you got some annoying habits that you probably need to work on. Or you kind of take that to the full extent, and you get married, and you step into that, and you're like, hey, I like doing things this way. And they're like, well, you've been wrong for a long time, apparently. You've got to figure that out now. It's different. Your setting has changed, and therefore your reasoning might not work anymore. We've got to be careful that we adjust our reasoning in what we're doing to make sure it's in alignment with the best for the setting, let alone that's ideal for what God would have for us. So with this, I got an action step for you. So here's the action step tied to point 1, and it's simply this. If we want to step away from flawed reasoning, this is what we got to do. So action step, find healthy accountability when you're making decisions. I don't believe this is in your notes, but you can write it down if you like. But we got to find healthy accountability. If you want to know if your action steps, if the way you're thinking, if your reasoning is sound, then you need a sounding board. You need someone you can go to and be that, they can be that for you. And I can't stress this enough. I talk about this in our organization a good bit and to different folks that I work with. And it's the idea that you, because of your wiring, because of your upbringing, because of your personality, because of your blah, 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 you view the world through a very specific lens. And it's not the same way that the rest of the world does. And there's a pretty high likelihood that when you walk into a metaphorical room, you're only going to see 2 walls of that room. Whereas somebody else, because of their perspective, can see the other walls in that room that you, for some reason, just can't get past. Let alone if you're in that metaphorical room, and much like what we talked about last week, there is just a full-blown lion in the room with you. And because you're just staring at these 2 walls only, you're never really thinking about the giant lion that's right behind you, crouching up to devour you. And in your situation, you might need somebody to come in and go, there's a lion! Like, it's right there! And you're like, what? And you're like, ah! Like, you just didn't know because you didn't have any accountability. You didn't have a sounding board, and you were only seeing things through a certain way. And I would encourage you to do that. Go to the people in your life. Find people who are positive accountability, who can help you decide if your reasoning, if what you're walking into is in fact, one, sound, wise, and two, God-glorifying. Is it going to be that? And if you find that to be, and if you have multiple sounding boards and you begin to get consistent feedback, you're going to recognize what is the wise path to go down. Find those people, those godly infused people who can speak wisdom in your life and use them as a sounding board. Genesis 12:17 as we continue to read. So we're back with Abram, and this is now what's occurring in the wake of him lying to Pharaoh. But the Lord inflicted serious disease on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Interestingly enough, in the biblical narrative, most of the time if you see Pharaoh showing up, which is just a figurehead of the Egyptian people throughout the generations of that time, anytime a Pharaoh shows up, typically they're in a negative posturing. Here, he was actually offering sanctuary for people who needed to find, water in the midst of famine. And he's the victim in this instance. And he's finding himself dealing with some real rough stuff that are the aftershocks, the issues that are coming from someone else's decision-making and flawed reasoning at that. And that's what Abram's done. And so that brings us to point 2. And Pharaoh finds himself at the brunt of this, and it's simply this: destructive cycles come with collateral damage. When you've got cycles of behavior that you start with flaw, you've kind of gone, no, it makes sense to me. This is why I'm doing this way, and it's becoming problematic. It isn't going to be as problematic to you, honestly, as it probably is going to be to the people around you. So many times in our lives when we're in the midst of destructive cycles, we get to a place where we're going, man, no, like it's just me. This only affects me. It's really not anybody else's problem. If you'll just let me deal with it on my time, and I've got it, and it'll happen. But it's just me. It doesn't affect anybody. You're lying to yourself. It affects so many more people than you care to admit. And here's the thing I hate to break it to you. The people it affects the most and the worst are the people that you want it to not affect at all, namely the people closest to you. Those people feel the wounds deeper than anyone else. You can keep telling yourself that it's not hurting them, but I promise you it is. And we've got to recognize that and own it. We've got to look at those things and go, you know what? Because I care, because I recognize that this issue is bigger than me, that it's affecting people beyond me, I'm going to have to cling to someone greater than me to find victory in it. And as we're going to see throughout this discussion over these 3 weeks, his name is Jesus. So we've got to make sure that we recognize that collateral damage is coming. And Pharaoh's feeling this firsthand. He's seeing that the decision that Abram has made is causing great calamity in his household, and he's going to have some action steps and hold Abram accountable. Here's an action step for you in reference to this. We've got to be cognizant of how our choices are affecting those around us. So you've got to be cognizant about how your choices are affecting those around you. And you want to know what one of the most courageous things you can do, that's incredibly difficult to do, but I will really encourage you to do it, is you can ask. You can go to people around you and ask, is there anything that I'm doing that really is affecting you that I need to work on and I need to develop? I know I joked about it earlier and talking to my wife about that, but that's a very productive and healthy thing. Now, on the back end of that, if you're a person who has somebody who is that courageous to ask that of you, be kind in your words. Speak the truth in love, as Scripture says. Don't hold back, but also don't be a jerk. Deliver that message seasoned in grace, as we've talked about before, because that's an incredibly pivotal moment if somebody is that willing to be that honest about what they're dealing with. It means that they recognize something's going on and they want to work towards a solution. And we've got to be courageous enough to ask that. Now, let me give you a forewarning. It's a difficult one, and you'll see this kind of reverberate throughout this narrative. And I've talked about this, I believe, before here, but it's a statement that I really kind of built together in the crucible of a lot of things, even within my own life over the years, and it's simply this. When you find yourself in a situation where you have been either A, dealing with so many heavy things that have been inflicted on you, or B, you're just in these cycles of self-destruction that you can't seem to get out from underneath, it seems and feels very hopeless. And even the idea of owning up to the problems that maybe you've inflicted on the people around you feels pretty hopeless, because you don't have any control over whether or not they're going to receive that, hey, I'm sorry, I'm working out. You don't know if they're going to receive it. You don't know what that's going to look like. And even if they do receive it, odds are it's going to take some time. It's not going to be just an immediate one and done. It's great, everything's honky-dory, okay? It's going to take some time. And so with that, what I want you to understand is this: hope in this world, in our situation, in a fallen context, hope is not the absence of consequences, but it is the promise of restoration. That is huge, because so many times we will think that because I'm dealing with consequences, this is hopeless. Now, I'll tell you this, something that's pretty beautiful is the idea that our greatest consequence that we deserve is death. For our sins, for our trespasses that separate us from God. But he saw fit to send his son Jesus to die for us, so that one day we get to have victory over death, be with him in heaven, and not get what we deserve. And hope in that instance is no consequences at that point. But we're not in heaven yet. You're in a fallen world. And your decisions, your actions have consequences as it applies to those around you. But you have a God who's in the business of restoring in this life, let alone the next. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to go on the journey towards restoration, even though you're going to have to battle some consequences along the way? Because I'll tell you right now, he's faithful and he'll be with you through it, but you're going to have to cling to him at every step of the journey. Got to be cognizant of how our choices are affecting those around us. Let's jump over to Genesis 20. Now, you're going to notice something has changed now. So we're moving forward in Genesis here. We were in 12, now we're in 20. No longer will you hear him being referred to as Abram, but now as Abraham, and his wife will no longer be referred to as Sarai, but as Sarah. What's occurred is that Abraham has entered into this huge covenant with God, where God's going, man, I'm going to make of you a great nation, and the nation of Israel is going to come from this. Liken it in your own life, if you're a follower of Christ, to that kind of turning point in your narrative where you entered into that covenant relationship through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ in your life. But what we're going to see here in now Abraham, where God literally looked at him and said, now you belong to me, so much so that I'm changing you and your wife's name, we're still going to see him fall prey to the same nonsense that he did beforehand in his life. Genesis 20 verse 1. Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar, and there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, she is my sister. Really, dude? Already again? She is my sister. Then Abimelech, which is a title for a ruler of that area similar to Pharaoh, Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to her, you are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She's a married woman. Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And didn't she also say, he is my brother? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands. Then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, and so I have kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all you belong to, you will die. Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, what have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such a great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should never be done. And Abimelech asked Abraham this, and what comes next is powerful. He said, what was your reason for doing this? And finally, we get to see why what was Abram and now is Abraham justified this behavior in his mind. Abraham replied, I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God. And I just want to, this is nonsense on his part, but we are all guilty of this at times. There is surely no fear of God in this place. Like he's looking at the king, and he's like, y'all don't fear God. Y'all don't love God at all. And they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, you follow this nonsense. This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother. He started with judgment, of looking at the people in the context he was in and just casting judgment blindly of the people in the land he was walking into. And he was so manipulative in what he was doing that he qualified his love and his wife's love for him. He said, if you love me, then you will participate in my destructive behavior. Sound familiar? 3 is this. Destructive cycles are perpetuated by self-justification. It's a repeat offender on this. He's even supposed to be like in covenant with God. He's no longer Abram, he's Abraham. And he's walking in covenant with God, and he's still looking at his wife, still in the midst of these cycles of sin, and going, if you love me, you will sin with me. That ain't how it works for him. And he's starting in judgment in the way he's interacting with people. And he's just justified it all in his mind. And at any point in time in our lives, we look at what we're doing and we just justify what's going on therein. This is weighty, so I'll give you a lighthearted story to kind of break it up. The cycle in my life that's like this, where I self-justify, is one where my brain tells me that my body is capable of doing things it's no longer capable of. Anybody with me on that? I used to do like all kinds of running and stuff through cross country and track, not only in high school but at college, and everything like that was all great, well, and good. But I have not for many moons done anything close to that, okay? And I need to get better at it. With taking care of myself physically because of the fact that I have children now, and they probably want me around for a while, hopefully. And with that, I need to value that. But what happens is this. Every time I mentally gear up for this, and I do this repetitiously every 6 months or so. And you already saw it in a promo video, and you're going to see it on full display when we put it up later. They called me a couple weeks ago, and they're like, Seth, we want you to come. We're doing this kind of promo thing for our kickoff weekend. We want you to kind of get in athletic gear and show up to this field. And I was like, any more context to that? And they were like, nope. And so I show up, and I am doing like squats and wind sprints and lunges. I'm going to tell you right now, that ain't something Seth's done in a long, long time, okay? They also have me doing like trying to kick a field goal, which is something I've literally never done at any point in time. And my brain went into it like, you got this, boy. Like, and I just was like getting after it. And like the first few, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm good for one go round, you know what I'm saying? And so I was getting after it. I blew my knee out kicking one football one time, okay? Mid-30s start turning on you. Your body starts going, I don't like you no more. And I was going at it, and I was like, boom, and then I couldn't walk for 3 days. I was just limping up the house. Taylor was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I kicked a football? I don't know what to tell you. And I just do that regularly, where I'll have a buddy who calls me up, and they'll be like, hey, man, let's go. And I'm like, you better believe let's go. And I'll get out there. I will destroy my body for 30 minutes, and then I'll be done for like 4 weeks, and I'll be like, you know what, we'll circle back to this 6 months from now and kind of just re-gauge this. And I do the same thing over and over again. But my brain, my self-justification is, Seth, you know what you're capable of. You've done this before. I mean, it was like, more than like we're getting pretty many decades away. Like we're measuring by decades now, not by years. Like it's been a while. No. Like, you're capable, buddy. Like you got this. Da-da-da-da-da. And we do that. Both in goofy things like that, but in severe moments in our lives where we will go, this worked in another scenario for me. Or I've worked it out in my brain how I think it is going to work out. And I've justified what I'm doing, where I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. And we'll even try to reason the people around us who are trying to help us. People will be like, hey, this is not good. You need to be blah. And they're actually courageous enough to be honest with us because of the collateral damage we're causing. And we'll go, no, like you just don't understand. Let me reframe it for the 1,000th time. And maybe you'll finally get that what I'm doing makes sense. And the rest of all you people are crazy. Like, it's not how it works. If you recognize that you're self-justifying over and over again, odds are that something's amiss. Action step with this one is as follows. When confronted with your issues, evaluate the accuracy of what is being said. Hear me, don't just take everything at face value. If somebody just comes at you and spouts nonsense at you, I'm not saying, listen to them. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Vet it with some people. Talk to some folks that you really feel like know you and can speak into your life. Evaluate the accuracy of what is being said, and then take action steps towards resolving the problem. Pretty straightforward. When somebody confronts you with an issue, with a situation confronts you with an issue, evaluate it, assess it, have those accountability sounding boards, and then when you validate that in fact a problem is there, stop self-justifying and take steps towards resolving that issue. Here's where it's going to get real heavy, okay? Just going to warn you in advance. We're skipping forward, if it wasn't already, sorry. Genesis 26, we're moving forward. We were in 20 and we're in 26. We have now moved on past Abraham and the nation to which he was promised. And there's all this really cool stuff that's happening where both he and his wife are very late in their years, and they don't even believe that it's capable for them to have kids. Through the power of God, they have a son. His name's Isaac. And through him, this mighty nation is going to come about. And so Isaac is one who is very much it's going to be kind of eerie for you whenever I read this to you. So I'm not going to give you more context. I'm just going to read it. Genesis 26:6. So Isaac stayed in Gerar, okay? This is many, many years later. He's back in Gerar where his father was. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." What? Have you ever done this parallel study in the Bible? Hello. Because he was afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is beautiful. When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, once again, Abimelech is a title, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife, Rebekah. So Abimelech summoned to Isaac and said, "She is really your wife? Why did you say she is my sister?" Isaac answered him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Then Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the men might well have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Here's the fourth one. We're going to hit it real quick this week, and we're going to dive into it pretty deep next week. Destructive cycles can be copied and pasted into your children, into the people that you care about the most, the next generation. And children's a pretty straightforward, obvious, on the nose example, but this is truly transcendent of even just family dynamics. If you are a leader in your organization or anywhere, I think I've talked about this before, but you are the culture of whatever it is you have been given to influence. And so if you are instilling your own destructive behavior and cycles into that business, guess what? Your employees, your team members are going to begin to emulate that same destructive behavior. But we see this in families so many times. And it's not an inevitability, but it does happen. And it does happen a lot. A lot of back and forth, and I've done a lot of research on it through the years when it comes to, nature versus nurture. Are we just programmed and doomed for failure because of the genes that were within us, or is it because of the context that we were raised in? And the short answer is nobody's super on the same page about it. What I will tell you is this, is that as an influencer, whether as a parent or in any circle or sphere you are in, your behavior, your cycles matter, and it will affect others. And that collateral damage might not simply be that people are hurt. It may be that they become the very thing that you are struggling with, which is the thing I think you don't want to happen the most. The action step for that one is a pretty weighty one, but once again, it's a very courageous one. You got to own your part. You got to apologize, and you got to take steps towards healing. And all that's going to take time. Man, when it comes to this sort of thing, it's a trust dynamic. Like, can I tell you that it's when you enter into a place where your destructive behavior has caused collateral damage, let alone if it has inflicted that upon those you influence, you have broken trust. And trust is not something that is given, it is something that is earned. And the unfortunate nature of things is that a lot of times we want to just approach it from the standpoint of, hey, I acknowledge it's a thing, everything's good now, right? Bad news for you, no. I didn't say that hope was just immediate awesomeness always. I said that consequences are a thing. It's not the absence of consequences, but it's the promise of restoration. And restoration means that when that, throughout your life, if you've been putting in dividends, coins into this proverbial piggy bank of trust, and you're filling up with little actions of trust, whenever that trust is destroyed, you just took a sledgehammer to that piggy bank, and you can't just put it right back the way it was. You've got to get the piggy bank back. It's empty, and slowly but surely, you got to put the coins back in and build it back up over time. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means that restoration takes time. And you are only responsible for your side of whatever's going on. So let me kind of pause for a few moments to address what's going on in any number of you in preparation for what, quite frankly, we're going to talk about next week. But when I say that, when I talk about that, it can be copied and pasted in the next generation. There is a very high likelihood that that really stirs a lot of things in a lot of you because of your context, maybe your family. So there's two people in this room that applies to. One is the person who has been inflicting those things, that you're the one in the destructive cycles. Can I tell you, can I implore you, there is hope, and the people around you want to cheer you on towards healing. Even though you might go, but I don't know, Seth. No. They want healing for you. They want you to get to a place where you are no longer surviving, you're thriving. They want that for you desperately, and do not fall prey to the lie that God in heaven doesn't want it for you also. Recognize it, step outside of it, and break the chains of that cycle in your life. And cling to the one who's the only one who's going to be able to get you through it, because it is not in our strength that his strength is made perfect. It is in our weakness, in our depravity, in our downtrodden, destructive nature that his strength is made perfect. And finally, to those of you who find yourself maybe on the other side of that, can I tell you, if you're one that you see some of the same things in your parents or your organization, whatever, and you're beginning to recognize that those things have affected you, and maybe even you're starting to emulate some of those things yourself, and you're starting to struggle with that which you see in the mirror, can I tell you, it does not have to be that way with you. As we're going to see next week as we study further into these generations, it takes someone finally saying, not so with me, not so with my family, my legacy shall be different. And that hope is yours in Christ Jesus. If you will lay that behind you and walk forward and define what your next needs to look like in tandem with who Christ has called us to be. Let us be those people who strive to break free of those chains and those cycles and cling to that which is the only thing that's going to bring us across the line, and it's the power of God Almighty. And let us lean on each other in the process and love each other well. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you that you are good, that you want to see us take steps towards healing. You want to see us break out of the chains of destructive cycles in our lives, and you want to be the very power and strength that can bring us along that journey. Let us not be quick to dismiss your healing because it's going to take time. Let us not be quick to say, nah, not for me, because it's going to be difficult. Let us recognize that you are our hope and you are our restoration, and we can cling to you, Jesus. We love you. In your name we pray.